Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a new library trustee, and I don't think the library staff likes me. Last night was our first trustee meeting, and it was a blur of meeting people, signing checks, voting for things I didn't understand, hearing reports on subjects I knew nothing about. So, in an effort to become more informed at my next meeting, I went down to the library and gave myself an orientation on my new job. At the library, I talked to a bunch of employees. I asked what they were working on and tried to help them as best as I could. I shelved some of the books that were sitting on a cart, enforced some of the library policies, and I made sure the staff was working hard by timing their breaks to ensure that they were helping patrons. I noticed a patron who was having problems at the circulation desk, so I decided to step in and help. They told her that she could only check out 3 books. Yeah, I told her she could check out 20. I mean, come on, if the library trustee can't bend the rules, who can, right? But they didn't really warm up to my help. In fact, I felt a little unwanted. So I called my Uncle Jack to find out how his library board works with his library staff.
Dan called us. I was a little amused. Your poor nephew, Dan, he seems predisposed to cluelessness.
If it's genetic, it's through the Y chromosome.
I mean, he is a new library trustee and he is doing his best, but without a proper orientation to his job, he didn't know any better. His call made me grateful for the orientation process we use in my library. It's really important for every new trustee to have an orientation to the library prior to their first board meeting. The chair of the board should have contacted Dan several weeks prior to the first meeting to welcome him to the board and to offer him an orientation to the board's role in leading the library, given him an introduction to laws related to the library, and introduced him to the director and staff. Dan's first impression of the library and his role on the board got confusing when he sat down at his first meeting last night with only a few ideas of what the board does. I too would feel a little uncomfortable not knowing much while business was conducted and then having to vote as motions were made.
Jack, I think you're right there. My experience has taught me that new board members need to sit down at a work session with the board chair and the director to start understanding some of the library acronyms that get used regularly, learn how the board operates, and to discuss the importance of policies for the management of the library. The orientation should include a list of the other board members, their contact information, and remaining terms of their appointments. A little background information on those individuals can be helpful. An organization chart of the library so the trustee can understand the relationship between the board and the director and how the board delegates operational decisions to the director.
A copy of the board operating policy that includes its bylaws, information on how it manages itself, and how board members relate to the director and staff. A brief review of the state's library laws so Dan can learn a little about their legal and fiduciary responsibilities, patron privacy, and other related topics. The director or chair should get a copy of the library laws for you from the state library.
An introduction to the customer policies to provide consistent service to everyone in the community. A briefing on the personnel policies that the board has developed for the library's employees should also have been given to Dan. I can guarantee any new trustee will come away from the orientation with some questions, but will have a good idea of what they should be doing. And that is the first step to being a good board member.
Dan needs to schedule a couple of hours to get a tour of the library and branches from the director. Dan might be a regular library user at the headquarters or at one of the branches, but he is sure to be surprised at the amount of knowledge, the technology, and the effort it takes to have books on the shelves.
Well, after talking to my Uncle Jack and Aunt Mary, I decided to call my board chair and the library director and schedule a formal orientation. And it was great. I learned a lot more about my job as a policymaker. I also learned that it's not really my job to help out in the library, except when the director invites me to do certain tasks. Believe me, I'm never going to make those mistakes again. Oh, listen, I got to go. Oprah's coming on, and I never miss Oprah, ever.
Here are some questions that your board should consider. Does your library have a formal written orientation process? How could your board make things easier for new trustees? Has every present board member been through a structured orientation process? How often does the board review policies on how it relates to the library and library employees?